is the Regular Pastor Podcast, a podcast devoted to regular pastors and regular churches. My name is Landon Coleman. I am the regular pastor in residence at Emmanuel Baptist Church in Odessa, Texas. This is season 5 of the Regular Pastor Podcast. In previous seasons, I did interviews, but in season 4 and season 5, I'm talking about books and ideas in the day-to-day ministry of regular pastors. Most of the books that I talk about on this podcast are nonfiction, Bible, theology, ministry-related type books, but some are not, and this book is not. This book is titled Coming Apart, subtitled The State of White America from 1960 to 2010. The author is Charles Murray. This book is published by Crown Forum out of New York. It was published in 2012 and then again in 2013. The book is 417 pages. It's a long book, lots of information here. The volume that I read is sort of an average size mass market paperback style format of book. The layout of this book is pretty straightforward. There's a prologue, and then there's 17 chapters and 7 appendices. But the heart of the book is broken into 3 parts. So part 1 is the formation of a new upper class. Part 2 is the formation of a new lower class. Part 3 is why it matters. And then the last part, if you want to call it a part or a section, are the 7 appendices that come at the end. Let me tell you a little bit about the author. Charles Allen Murray is an American libertarian conservative political scientist, an author, and a columnist. He wrote a book called Losing Ground, American Social Policy from 1950 to 1980. That book came out in 1984. And in that book, he discussed the American welfare system. The book was widely read and discussed, influenced subsequent government policy. He then became well known for his controversial book, The Bell Curve, released in 1994. And in that book, he argues that intelligence is actually a better statistical predictor than parental, socioeconomic status, or education level, many different individual outcomes, including the home, job performance, pregnancy, out of wedlock and crime, social welfare programs, education efforts to improve social outcomes for the disadvantaged. All these things, he argues, are largely wasted. All these government efforts to change the outcomes, and in the bell curve, Murray argues that intelligence is a better predictor for positive social outcomes. It's more of an important predictor than your socioeconomic status or how much schooling you have, or any number of things. So that's Murray. He has a BA from Harvard and an MA and a PhD from MIT. So this guy's smart, he's educated, and he is a prolific writer. So what's the big idea of this book, Coming Apart? He starts in the beginning with the date November 21st, 1963. That's the day of the JFK assassination. And Murray says this on page 11 of the prologue. This book is about an evolution in American society that has taken place since November 21, 1963, leading to the formation of classes that are different in kind and in their degree of separation from anything the nation has ever known. I will argue, he says, that the divergence into these separate classes, if it continues, will end what has made America America. That's a pretty big undertaking and a pretty big claim to say that the U.S. is developing into 2 widely divergent classes, and that if this divergence continues, it's going to be the end. Not necessarily of America, but of what made America America through the ages. Things he's not arguing in this book. He says, I'm not arguing that America has ever been a classless nation or a classless society. He acknowledges we've always had different classes. And he also says, I'm not arguing that America is declining as a world power. That would be a separate argument. He's simply arguing that the heart of what makes America America is going to be gone if these 2 classes continue to grow and continue to move apart from each other. So let's talk about the important ideas in this book. I'll take one from each part. Part 1 in this book deals with the formation of a new upper class. And on page 16, Murray argues that the U.S. is developing a new upper class. We've always had upper class, but this new upper class is qualitatively different than anything we've known in the past. This upper class is remarkably rich, incredibly educated, and they are the elites of culture and society. This new upper class relies on the market value of brain power, and they rely on their wealth. They rely on the college sorting machine. That's the idea that getting into certain universities is largely restricted to certain classes of people, and these universities then sort people out so that they end up with people like them, marrying people like them, and thus perpetuating their upper class advantage. He talks about the homogamy of this upper class, just the inbreeding of similar people. These people marry each other, and their kids marry each other, and this class is largely closed off to anyone who's on the outside. An example of this is what he calls super zips. These are zip codes, and the zip code is highly affluent. Everyone is well educated. It's very expensive to live in these places. They have low crime, very little divorce, almost no single parents. All the things that plague the lower class in the United States are largely absent from these super zips. And that is Murray's take on this new upper class. Part 2, he talks about the formation of a new lower class. And this starts around page 128. He talks about how the founders of the United States believed from the beginning that the success of the American experiment would depend on the character of the American people, that without character, without a certain DNA in who we are as human beings, in a worldview, a way of thinking about life, that the American project wouldn't work, it wouldn't last. And Murray's argument is that it's slipping. It's not gone, but it's slipping, and it's in great danger. And he talks about, in this new lower class, this new working class, divorce is absolutely rampant. Single mothers and children growing up with no dads are amazingly common, just tragically common. Single moms, kids that don't have a dad present. He talks statistically, not just anecdotally, but statistically, about the rise in laziness and unemployment, especially among men. He talks about high crime rates, and there's more incarceration among this new working class. Now, again, he's not talking about racial groups here. He's just talking about class groups. And really, the whole book is focused on one racial group, and that's whites. So higher crime rate among these lower class whites, more incarceration. Ironically, there's lots of religious belief, but unfortunately, it's not matched by religious practice. So almost everyone in this new lower class would claim to be religious and spiritual and believe in God, but there's not a lot of teeth to any of that. There's not a lot of practice or involvement in the life of a local congregation. So that's part 1 and part 2. Part 3 is the question, what difference does all of this make? What do we do with all this data and this evidence for these two growing divergently classes, a new upper class and a new lower class? They're moving away from each other at breakneck speed. He says this on page 273, chapter 16. He says, this book is focused on the fortunes of whites as a way of stripping away any distractions and concentrating on my thesis. And here's the thesis. Our nation is coming apart at the seams. It's not ethnic seams, but the seams of class. The differences that he lays out in these two classes, upper and lower class, is just staggering. And he basically says we have two nations living within a nation at this point. And the title of the book says it all. The United States is coming apart. Favorite quotes from this book. page 267. This is a section of the book where there's a lot of data, a lot of information, a lot of detail, but the big categories are really fascinating. He's talking about 4 domains that impact the happiness of people today. And here are the 4 domains: family, vocation, faith, and community. Each one has a direct and a strong relationship to self-reported happiness. And he does a multivariate analysis to talk about the impact that each of these 4 domains has on the happiness of any American, regardless of class, regardless of social status. And it's fascinating because the world tells us at every turn to chase autonomy and independence and to be our own person. And Bible-believing evangelical Christians have access to all of these domains that really do contribute to our happiness, our well-being, our flourishing as humans. It's almost as if, evangelicals would say it's not almost as if, but it is, that we're living within the design of the universe, and we understand God's design for family, and we understand the importance of not just work, but vocation, and we understand the centrality of faith in our lives, and we understand the importance of community. All of those things are baked into biblical Christianity: family, vocation, faith, community, and statistically, they're all baked into what makes a person happy. What's the ministry takeaway of this book? If you're a regular pastor, you will minister in a community that is somewhat mixed, that involves people who live in both of these worlds. Now, granted, some will be called to pastor in a super zip, where the predominant class is upper class, and some are going to be called to pastor in poorer, more working class, lower class communities where that's the norm. But I think most regular pastors are going to find themselves in a church, and in your church there are going to be people on both ends of this class spectrum that Murray's talking about. And I'm just going to be honest with you, it's really hard to have all of these folks together in a single church. It's hard to have folks from divergent class experiences and to think about discipleship and community and leadership and mission and witness and how you do all of those things, not just individually as a collection of individuals, but together, how you do them as a unified church body. It's really tricky, and some of the answers are not immediately obvious. And certainly in this book, Murray's not going to give you any answers when it comes to ministry, but he is going to force you to think about some of the challenges that you're going to experience pastoring in the United States and pastoring in churches that are made up of people from different ends of the class spectrum. How about critique and criticism? The book was written in 2012, re-released in 2013. Some of the speculations and the predictions of this book simply could not foresee the election of Donald Trump, at least the first election, could not foresee the experience of COVID and the craziness of 2020, certainly did not foresee the re-election of Donald Trump after 4 years out of the White House. And in some respects, the world has changed since 2012. And in some respects, things have gotten worse, not better. And in other respects, maybe there are some lights going off and some bells going off and some alarms being heard by our society when we think about the importance of family, and we think about the importance of vocation, and we think about the importance of faith and the importance of community. Maybe there's some things that are positive and hopeful on the horizon. Murray ends the book with some degree of optimism. He says the United States is a resilient nation. There are things baked into who we are as a people that will help us pull through this. And the U.S. has surprised people in the past. He's hopeful that the U.S. will surprise people in the future. If you look this book up on Goodreads, the rating is 3.8. It's a little bit low for a typical book on Goodreads, but there's some controversial things that he talks about here. I gave it a 4-star rating. I enjoyed the book. Admittedly, I picked it up when the world had changed in some respects, and there were some national and cultural developments that Murray wasn't privy to when he wrote the book. As a pastor, it's certainly not a book about ministry. There's no biblical diagnosis or trajectory to follow, but it is a helpful book in understanding the context in which we live, and as pastors, in which we serve. And so, who should read the book? Well, this is a podcast for regular pastors, and if you're a pastor, you need to know your people. You need to know your context. You need to know your mission field. If you're an American and you care about this country and the future of this country, it's helpful to read books like this, to think about where we're at as a country, where we've been, where we might be headed. It's good to think about the predictors of success and happiness for your family and for your children. And there's a lot of stuff in this book, a lot of ideas that would be helpful, whether you're just a faithful American, a Christian living in this country, or whether you're a pastor trying to lead a congregation located in the United States. So that's the book, Coming Apart, and we pray that in the years to come, the dire possibilities presented in this book would not come to fruition, but that the people of God might come together, and that the people of this nation might also come together, and we might experience revival and awakening, just like we've experienced in the past. Thanks for listening to the Regular Pastor Podcast. You can subscribe for weekly episodes. We've got a few more left, not many, but a few here in Season 5. You can follow me online at regularpastor.com. You can find me on Goodreads, send me a friend request, search for Landon Coleman. And if you've got a book recommendation, something you'd like for me to read and discuss here on the podcast, let me know. Landon at EmmanuelOdessa.com. Until next week, this is the Regular Pastor out.